The Baltimore Ravens were one of the more successful teams in 2023, but after failing in the AFC Championship game, the expectations for this team in 2024 has reached an all-time high. And with an ultra-talented roster, there is very good reason for those expectations. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about the Baltimore Ravens and why I personally feel as if the Ravens are the biggest AFC threats to the Kansas City Chiefs. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to be breaking it down into 3 different segments. We'll start off by talking about a lot of the positive things going for this Ravens teams. These are things within their roster, within their conference, within this team in general. And then after that, we'll be talking about some of the opposites of that, mainly some things that are some negatives about this roster, some negatives about the situation around them. And then at the very end of the video, I'll give you guys my prediction for the upcoming season for this Ravens team, but let's just go ahead and hop right into it. But as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and start off by talking about the positives for this Ravens team. And like most videos, the first thing I really want to do is just briefly cover every single position on this roster. We'll start off with the offense for the Baltimore Ravens. Real quickly, I do want to skip Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about him a little bit in the positive section because it's Lamar freaking Jackson. Starting off with the running back room, you have a trio of running backs in Derrick Henry, Keaton Mitchell, and Justice Hill. I'm extremely excited to see what Keaton Mitchell can do for this offense. But I do want to give you guys a brief little warning here. Derrick Henry's not going to go for 2,000 rushing yards next year. Hell, honestly, I would be a little bit surprised if he reached over 1,200 rushing yards. And that's not because Derrick Henry has fallen off a cliff. No, this is still the same Derrick Henry. I fully expect him to be just as good this upcoming season as he was last year and the last couple years. But I really feel like this Ravens team is going to limit his carries to probably around 15 to 20 a game, whereas they're going to try to rotate guys like Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill in so that those guys can get roughly about 5-10 carries a game. I think the goal for Derrick Henry is to keep him healthy the entire season, keep his legs fresh for the playoffs, and that way when you do get to the playoffs, you can run Derrick Henry down the hill every single time. That way he's healthy and fresh for the playoffs. Looking at the receiving core, I don't really love this receiving core, but there is some young talents I'm extremely excited about. We'll start off with Zay Flowers. Last year in his rookie season, he was really awesome, and I do expect him to continue to take another step forward in year 2. I don't really know what his upside is as a player. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a true alpha #1 wide receiver, but I do think in this league, he's going to be a quality player for quite some time. Alongside him, you have some other young guys like Rashad Bateman and Tez Walker. I'm a little bit skeptical on Rashad Bateman at this point in his career. I've expected him to break out, but he's never really quite broken out to a level that I expect from him. But now that he's in this solidified role with this offense, I am extremely interested to see what he can do next year. Alongside those guys, it could be Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, and Deontay Hardy. None of those guys I think are going to be all that special, but we'll see if any of those guys can stand out next year. Your tight end room with guys like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely might just be the best tight end room in the entire NFL. Don't quote me on that. There might be a better team out there, but I definitely do think those guys are easily with those other ones that may be out there. Mark Andrews is arguably a top 5 tight end when healthy. I am a little concerned about the injury stuff that's been going on the past couple years, but when healthy, he's fantastic. And then behind him, you have a extremely high upside tight end in Isaiah Likely. I'm extremely excited to see what he can do in 2024 with hopefully an increased role. The offensive line is extremely interesting. Obviously, in the middle, you have Tyler Linderbaum, who is one of, if not the best centers in the entire NFL. But outside of him, the rest of the offensive line does have some question marks. Left tackle Ronnie Stanley, when healthy, is a fantastic tackle, but he has really struggled with injuries the past couple of seasons. It does look like he is going to be healthy by the start of this upcoming season, so hopefully he can play the entire year because this team does really need him to be out there next year. But then looking at the guard situation, it's extremely interesting. I don't want to talk about it quite yet in the positive section. We'll talk about it a little bit later in this video. Then your right tackle is Roger Rosengarten. He may have to fill in at left tackle if Stanley does have some injuries, but he's a good tackle. Defensively, you have a lot of really good players, guys like Justin Madubuike, Odafe Owe, Roquan Smith, Kyle Van Noy, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams. All those guys are some really awesome players. But then you have some young guys with those guys who I'm extremely excited about. Guys like David Ojabo, Adisa Isaac, Trenton Simmons, and Nate Wiggins. All of these guys, I'm very intrigued to see what they can bring for this defense this upcoming season. Obviously, the defensive coordinator is out, which I may or may not be talking about a little bit later, but I'm extremely intrigued to see what this new defensive coordinator does bring to this team. But then I want to circle back to Lamar Jackson, who I was talking about a bit earlier. Lamar freaking Jackson is a top 5 quarterback in this league, and arguably, I think he's a top 3 quarterback. When looking at the rest of the quarterbacks in the NFL, I can really only tell you guys two definitive guys who are better than Lamar Jackson, and those guys are going to be Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. But even then, I do think there is a debate to be had regarding Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, but in my personal opinion, I'd rather have Josh Allen. But outside of those two guys, Lamar Jackson is probably better or right below anybody out there. Like, you have Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy. Lamar Jackson's better than those guys. Some questionable ones is guys like Joe Burrow. I do think Lamar's better at it, but I do think there is a debate to be had. And there's a couple other quarterbacks that you could potentially name in this video, but Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback, pretty plainly put. He's a 2-time MVP, could be a 3-time one this upcoming season. He's a fantastic quarterback in this league. And I think the thing that makes Lamar Jackson so unique is his overall greatness in almost everything. Obviously, we all know that he is maybe the most athletic quarterback we've ever seen at the quarterback position. He's a smooth runner who could do everything out of pocket. He's an athletic freak. He's an athletic phenom. We've never seen a guy quite like Lamar Jackson. But one of the more underrated parts of his game is how solid of a pocket passing quarterback that Lamar Jackson has become in the league. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys Lamar is a top 5 pocket passer in the NFL. I would save that for guys like Stafford, Dak, maybe Brock Purdy, and maybe like Tua. But Lamar Jackson is pretty awesome at being a pocket passing quarterback. And I think that makes Lamar Jackson damn near unstoppable. When you game plan to keep him in the pocket, he is more than okay with just sitting back there, dropping back and throwing dimes. And when you do get after him as a pass rusher and when you do force him to escape the pocket, this is a dude who can make plays on the run or make plays with his feet. I mean, it's Lamar Jackson. He's freaking awesome. And I think the biggest reason why Lamar Jackson has spurred into the player that we know him as is because the coaching staff lets Lamar Jackson be Lamar Jackson. My biggest pet peeve regarding NFL coaching staffs is when coaching staffs take a quarterback who has a specific skill set and then decide to try to morph him into something that he's clearly not. When Lamar Jackson was coming out of college, I did not really know what the Ravens were going to do with him because they had Joe Flacco, a traditional pocket passing quarterback, and now all of a sudden you're going to get this athletic freak like Lamar Jackson and expect him to play like Joe Flacco. But they did a fantastic job of building a system around him, and now that he's flourished into a solid pocket passing quarterback, you can basically do whatever you want with Lamar and he's going to be just fine doing it. It really makes game planning for him as a quarterback damn near impossible because he can do everything great. So again, credit to Jim Harbaugh, credit to the Harbaugh staff, credit to everyone around him. The coaching staff is great, the offense is great, the defense is great. But now let's talk about something else. All right, let's talk about some negatives. These are going to be things that are within their control and maybe not in their control. Let's talk about it. Let's start off with the roster and some of the key roster issues I do have with this team. Going back to the receiving core, I don't love the receiving core. I think it's a flawed receiving core, but with Lamar Jackson, I think it gets the job done. My bigger issue with this offense is going to be within the offensive line. Again, we talked about Ronnie Stanley. When healthy, he's great, but he's just not been able to stay healthy his past couple years. But I think a bigger issue outside of Stanley is going to be your left guard and right guard. As we sit here today, just via every single website that I could find, it does seem like Andrew Voorhees and Ben Cleveland are going to be the 2 starting guards. But I have seen some various reports saying that Josh Jones could potentially replace Ben Cleveland as a starting right guard. Either way it goes though, this is a really poor and inexperienced guard combination. Andrew Voorhees was a 7th round pick just in last year's draft. I know he had some injuries and I know he was going to get drafted higher, but he's inexperienced. He has not played a snap and there's a lot of question marks regarding how good he's going to be as a guard. And then Ben Cleveland has not even been solidified as the starting right guard in this team. It's been very back and forth whether or not he's going to be starting over Josh Jones, and as we sit today, who knows who's going to be the starting right guard. So I think that does tell you that this team does have some concerns with the guards. Now, I do think when healthy, the tackles of Ronnie Stanley and Rosengarten and Tyler Linderbaum are good enough to have this offensive line be good enough, but it is a concern that I do have for this team. But just looking at this roster from head to toe, I think my biggest concern for this roster is going to be depth. I do think there are some good depth positions in a couple positions, mainly on the defense. Like, I think their cornerbacks and secondaries in general have some pretty good depth. I think their defensive line has some young pieces who I'm excited about, but Adisa Isaac, David Ajabo, Rashad Nichols, Travis Jones, none of those guys have really proven anything for me yet. So I think you're relying on a lot of your starters to be superstars the entire season and, well, stay healthy. Like, if you look at the backup for Lamar Jackson, it's Josh Johnson. Josh Johnson has been in the league for, I don't know how many years, since like 2008. He's almost 40 years of age and has never been a good quarterback in the league ever. I don't even know if he's going to be on the team come halfway through the season. But that's who their backup quarterback is. It's Josh Johnson. And then behind him, you do have Devin Leary, who I'm excited about, but he's a rookie, so we'll see if he's anything decent. But barring this team going out there and maybe potentially picking up a backup quarterback in the free agency market, that's their backup quarterbacks. And if Lamar Jackson misses time, that's not a good look. And then receiving core wise, you're relying on guys like Devontae Walker, Tylan Wallace, Deontay Hardy, maybe Malik Cunningham can get in there. None of those guys are that great. Tez Walker is a rookie, so we'll see what he can turn out to be. And then as I said earlier, defensively speaking, you don't have a lot of depth in a lot of key positions. Again, secondary wise, you have some pretty solid depth overall. I don't think that's a huge issue, but if you do have a major position or a guy who goes out for the season, you're going to be relying on a guy who maybe doesn't have a whole lot of experience to step in and make some plays. But moving off of the overall roster on this team, let's talk about the defensive coordinator, because when Mike McDonald accepted the Seattle Seahawks job, that obviously shook the Ravens a tad bit. Mike was the best defensive coordinator in the entire NFL last year, and I do think he's going to be freaking awesome for the Seattle Seahawks. But you did decide to promote your linebacker coach in Zach Orr to be your new defensive coordinator, so I do expect the system to be fairly similar to what you ran last year, but we'll see if it does. But we'll see if it does live up to par with what was happening last year. He's extremely young and an inexperienced coach, so we'll have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I think big picture wise, I don't really have too many concerns about what this Ravens team is going to do in the regular season. Like, I don't really care to look at their schedule. They're going to be pretty awesome next year. They're going to win easily over 10 games, probably win or come second place in this division, and they'll definitely be making a deep playoff run. But to me, that is a bit of a concern in my opinion. This is a Ravens team that for the last couple years now has been able to make these really awesome regular seasons, but then fizzle out in the playoffs. I feel like last year was a prime example of this Ravens team the past couple years. They were awesome in the regular season. They dominated the San Francisco 49ers. They dominated the Detroit Lions. They were dominating the entire league last year, and then when it came to the playoffs, yes, they got an easy win against the Texans, but then they faced the Chiefs, and halfway through that game, it was looking as bleak as it possibly could. Yes, they did make it interesting late in that game, but ultimately, they did lose that one. And I do feel like last year was maybe their best opportunity of all the past couple of seasons. We'll see if that opportunity does spur up again this year, but last year was such a good opportunity for them to make a deep playoff run and to potentially make it to a Super Bowl, but they failed. And it's been like that the past couple of seasons where they'll make these really awesome regular seasons and, like I said, fizzle out in the playoffs. Will they do that again, or will they be able to surpass the ghosts that have been haunting them the past couple years? This is a Ravens team that arguably is a worser version of what they were last year. I say worser as in like 0.5% worse than what they were last year. Like, yeah, you're going to lose out on some guys, but they found some good replacements regardless. But again, you're basically a worser version of what you were last year, and the expectations are even higher than they were last year. This team has to make a good playoff run, and I think if they don't make it to a Super Bowl, I think that's pretty reasonable to say that that was a failure of a season. So, all right, we talked about the positives, we talked about the negatives. Let's now give you guys an actual prediction as to what the Ravens will be in 2024. And I'll put it pretty plainly. This is an awesome Ravens team. They're going to be awesome in the regular season. I can't quite predict what the playoffs will look like because that's impossible to predict. But when it comes down to it, I think this Ravens team is easily going to win somewhere between 11 to 13 games next year. They'll likely win their division, if not come second place in the division, and they'll be making a pretty solid playoff run. I think their upside is Super Bowl champions. I think their lowest, maybe the floor for that team, is going to be maybe a wild card 7th seed that loses in the first round. Regardless though, it's an awesome team. They got a lot of things going for them. But I appreciate you guys watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button because that would help me out a ton. And I love you guys. Peace.